Hey guys, it's Kevin again, my review for The Spy Who Dumped Me. And what The Spy Who Dumped Me is essentially about is we center on the character of Audrey, and basically she is someone who has recently broke up with her boyfriend, and she's still kind of getting over him, and basically one day, she's randomly working at her job, and she is kidnapped by these two by these two international agents, basically, and they let her in and tell her that her boyfriend was a spy, and basically from there she gets involved in a very dangerous and violent conspiracy, and she basically has to do what she can to get her and her friend safely out of it, and that's really all I'm going to say. So The Spy Who Dumped Me in general, I'm not going to try to sugarcoat this. I was absolutely dreading this film. Everything about this just looked like a recipe for disaster. I mean, you had Mila Kunis, who I do like, but I just feel as of late, she really has not been choosing the best of films. Especially post Bad Moms, for sure, was really not looking good for her. And you also had Kate McKinnon, who, again, I do think could be genuinely good. I just don't really think she's been making very good choices recently, especially with things like Rough Night and things like that. And it just looks so obnoxious and over the top. And while this film is still very over the top, it is a bit better than I was expecting. The Spy Who Dumped Me is surprisingly not awful. It's not a good film, but it is not as awful as I thought it was going to be, and we're just getting to right now. And the first thing I will say is the acting here, for the most part, I do actually think is pretty good. Mila Kunis does give a good performance in here overall. I did like the character that she was playing. There's not a lot to her, but I do think she did a good job in this film. Kate McKinnon as well. A lot of people are talking about her and how she's like the scene stealer, and I don't know if I'd go that far. I do think she did a good job with what she had. At least 50% of her lines did make me laugh, but the other 50% really didn't. But the thing that does benefit it more is that this character isn't nearly as, I think, annoying as some of her other roles. She does have some annoying lines here and there, but there are some things that she did that genuinely did make me laugh a little bit. And I do think the chemistry between Kunis and McKinnon was much better than I was expecting. I was expecting these two to have no chemistry whatsoever, and thankfully I think did work pretty well together, and I was impressed by them. But someone I do actually really want to credit is Justin Theroux in this movie. I really absolutely love Justin Theroux. I've gushed about him enough. I think, him and all the Leftovers actors I really want to see do well. And no, I'm not just saying that because he was in the Leftovers. I think he's a genuinely very talented actor, and thankfully, this is a very good role for him. I really liked him as this spy. He has an amazing action scene in the beginning of this movie, and while he's not in this movie a lot, I do think he's in it just enough, and I did like what we got with his character overall. I think him and Kunis worked pretty well together, and I did really like him here. Sam Heughan, I really liked as well. Gillian Anderson does a good job. Really, everyone, I think, is pretty well casted here. Really, no one I thought was necessarily bad in this film. But now we got to get to the directing, because that's the thing I was most worried about with this movie. It just looked very mean-spirited, and it didn't really look like there was much of anything to it. And I will say, while the film isn't, like, amazing or anything, like, I'm not saying this is on the level of, like, Blockers or Game Night or something like that, the directing was a little bit more competent than I expected. The comedy, I think, actually did work kind of well at points. I was laughing more than I expected to. I will say, I think I laughed about maybe 7 or 8 times in this film, and they weren't, like, chuckles either. They were legitimate laughs. I was enjoying myself throughout some of this movie, and I do think the comedy sometimes was really good. And I will also say, I think that the spy side of things, like the action, was also well done. I do think that those two sides worked very well together, and it was a little bit more well balanced than I expected it to be, and I think the directing was pretty good there. When the film tries to get dramatic, though, it does not always work. I think the dramatic moments did feel very heavy-handed. It just felt a bit forced, and it just did not work as well as they really wanted it to. But that's not really my problem with this movie. My problem in this movie is, without a doubt, the writing here, because the writing to this film just is not very, it's just not that well done. It's very poor. It could have been a lot better for sure. The main story here, I do think, is pretty good, and I do think there are some things that I definitely did enjoy, but the film just has a lot of script problems. Like, for example, the characters in this film are very hollow. There just really isn't much of anything to them. Mila Kunis, for example, all she really is in this movie is just this girl who, for some reason, as we find out, just doesn't know how to, doesn't really accomplish much of anything. She never really has finished anything. There's many parts in the film where, she harkens back to certain things that Justin Theroux said to her, and they try to make it this arc of, oh, now that she's involved in this, now she's finally doing something eventful with her life, doing something exciting, and it just does not really work. The setup for her was very weak, and I just never really cared that much about her character. Like I said, I like Kunis in the role, but the film for me never really went the extra mile and really delved that deep into her character. And that's the thing I will give something like Game Night and Blockers, or even Tag, over this movie, is that those movies did a much better job of establishing those characters. And that's why I think they're far better films overall. This film just did not really do that. And Kate McKinnon especially, there's like nothing for her here. She's simply just a struggling actress that has wanted to do tons of roles, and she constantly uses pretty much every single tactic that she can to try to put on a show or try to act, play some sort of parts. And sometimes it works and sometimes it really doesn't. There's really not much for her to do here overall, and I do think that the two characters were not that very well written. I will say I thought the friendship overall I did enjoy. I think that the friendship really is kind of like the heart of this movie, and I do think that worked quite well. But just their characters, I really did not care that much for. And the spying stuff in this movie also does not really make a lot of sense, I have to say. I will say there are some things I do like. I think the spying stuff at first is really good, but you eventually realize that all of this, carnage and all this ridiculous stuff that's going on, it's all over this one flash drive, basically. And we don't know exactly why they want it, but basically, we're supposed to be really invested in this flash drive that they have, and I will say I think they did a good job of taking the spying stuff seriously. That's not my problem. My problem is that I think they threw way too much at the wall in the third act of this movie. There's a certain point here where you think, oh, maybe things are wrapping up. You know where you think you know where it's going to go. It seems pretty simplistic. Then the film keeps going, and they throw another twist at you, and you think, okay, now I know what's going on. Then they throw another twist at you, and towards the end of this movie, they just keep throwing way too much at the wall, and it just does not really make a lot of sense. It seemed like they were trying to copy off of better spy films, and it just did not really work here. I've heard people compare this to a Mission Impossible film, and I do think it is an apt comparison, but in the sense that this film was trying to be like a Mission Impossible film, and it just did not understand, I think, the essence of what Mission Impossible really is, and I think it really was kind of missing here. The fact that I didn't care about the characters especially, I thought was kind of missing, and I just didn't really, the spying stuff in general, while I did enjoy some of it, the mission itself, I will admit, really did not make a lot of sense at all, I have to say, and I do think that it really did not work there. Also, there is this thing they keep doing in the movie where they cut back to showing how Mila Kunis and Justin Theroux met, and at first it's very effective. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm really liking this. I really want to see where it goes. But they only do it about 2 or 3 times in the film, and they eventually just forego it entirely. Now, eventually there is a point to it, but I really wanted to see more of it because I actually really liked that part of the film. I wanted to see more of them meeting up. I thought it could get us more into their characters, and especially something that happens early on in the film, I thought they were trying to make up for Theroux's limited screen time in the present, and they really don't. Like I said, they just kind of abandoned it, and I really did not understand why they did that. It felt like this was the perfect opportunity to get us invested in this relationship, and they just really did not do that. And Look, there definitely is a reason why they were showing it to us, but I just did not feel it was that strong. I really wanted more from that side of the story, and again, it just wasn't really there. Comedy-wise, there were some things that really did make me laugh. There's this one recurring joke involving Sam Huygens' partner in the film, who went to Harvard, and he likes to make a big deal about it, and those jokes were a lot of fun, I have to say. But speaking of Sam Huygens, I really did like him at first, and I'll tell you why. Because when him and Mila Kunis met up, I thought for sure they were going to try to force some sort of romance down her throat. And for a while, they really don't. They're just kind of platonic friends who are involved in this, and he's, trying to protect them or whatever. And then towards the end of the movie, they start to give them a forced romance, and it really did not work for me. I really did not understand why they were doing this. It felt so forced. It felt so out of place, and I don't think they really needed to go there at all. I just didn't really see the point of them doing that. It felt very predictable, and a lot of things in this movie are, in fact, very predictable. Also, there's many characters that should die in this film, and then somehow they didn't. Like, I am all for suspending your disbelief, but guys, there's literally a scene in this movie where a character is hit with a grenade, and I don't mean like a small grenade. I don't mean like they're hit with a grenade. Like, the grenade goes off, and it should, like, decimate them. They should be gone. They show up later in the film, and only half of their face is burnt. So yeah, that's the logic we're dealing with here. Like I said, it really does not make a lot of sense there at all. But in terms of writing overall, I thought it was all right. Nothing amazing, but just things like that really did bother me. The action, like I said, I did enjoy it. It was good in the moment. It actually was real. Kunis and McKinnon have admitted that some of the action you see is actually real, and I was overall impressed by that. Nothing amazing or anything, but it was better than I expected it to be. It is kind of derivative, but some of the action I did actually kind of like. There's a really good car chase in the film that I thought was honestly pretty riveting. There's a good shootout in a restaurant that I really did enjoy. So there's also, like I said, a really good opening action scene with Justin Theroux, and I really did like that side of the film. I just need a little bit more of that, and it just never really was there. I thought the action was just unfortunately few and far between. Similar to a lot of stuff in this movie, was very few and far between. The score I thought was all right, and then the editing. Like I said, this film is way too long. I really do think that they could have cut down a chunk of this movie. There's a lot of characters we meet that feel very inconsequential, and I really don't think they needed to be there. There's definitely one too many characters. There's definitely a little bit too much going on. There are some things I do enjoy in this movie. McKinnon and Kunis weren't nearly as annoying as I expected them to be. I did enjoy the spy stuff to a fault, but this film just did not seem to know when to wrap up. It didn't seem to know when to just call it quits, and it just kept going, and the more it went on, the more I really just kind of wanted it to end. It's not as painful as I expected it to be. It's nothing amazing. It's nothing that you really necessarily need to see. Like I said, it does have a good role for Theroux and things like that, but a lot of the things that I think they could have done a lot more with, they unfortunately just don't. And what we're really left with is just a very generic spy comedy that you've probably seen done better in you've probably seen done better in much better movies overall. And I am going to give The Spy Who Dumped Me a C. Like I said, it made me laugh more than I expected. It's not nearly as awful as I expected it to be, but it's still not really that great at all. It's nothing that you really need to rush out and see. If you're going to see any film this week, see Christopher Robin. Definitely is a much more, I think, not only is it more, competent and things like that, but it's a film that just in general I think will resonate with you more. But either way, guys, in my review, The Spy Who Dumped Me, let me know what you guys saw this movie overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video. Once again, thank you 22 Tiger Dude for editing this video. Very much appreciated. We'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.